This week we're going to finish up our Adler and Van Doren book, How to Read a Book, and we're going to do that by covering syntopical reading. But before I go into syntopical reading, I want you guys to read Raskas's article, The Book of Ruth, A Contrast to the End of the Book of Judges, located on EmuLearn. And I want you to complete an inspectional and analytical reading of this article. So, on your worksheet, first thing I want you to do, your inspectional reading, just tell me 3 things you learned about this article from that. So remember, that's looking at headings, maybe reading the introduction and conclusion. What do you just learn from giving a real brief cursory overview of the article? And then for your analytical reading, I want you to go ahead and do all of the analytical reading rules that we've learned. That would be rules 1 through 11. And this is kind of our review, almost like our little mini midterm, because we are at the midpoint of the class. Now, for all of these rules, I only expect you to write 1 or 2 sentences to answer each one. You don't need to give me very in-depth responses. For rule number 3, where you have to outline, if you just give me at least 3 major sections in Raskas's article, that's fine. Just make sure that you do include a statement that explains how each section relates to the prior one. So this rule is, it kind of has 2 parts. It's about outlining the book, but then also explaining how all these different sections of the article come together as a whole, okay? And some of you were leaving that out of your journal entries, so I just want to reemphasize that. And then for rules 9 through 11, I kind of combine them together. And basically, I just want you to state for this last rule whether you agree with Raskas or not, and do that in a courteous and fair way. So this could just be a short paragraph here of maybe 3 or 4 sentences. All right, so go ahead, read Raskas's article, and come back to this video. I do want to point out that you will likely use Raskas's article in assignment 2, so you're kind of doing some of your research and prep work for that assignment at this point. So pause the video and come back. All right, what is syntopical reading? Adler and Van Doren define it as how to read 2 or more books, or I would say sources, on the same subject. So for assignment 2, you're going to be practicing syntopical reading because you're going to be reading at least 2 or 3 sources on the Book of Ruth, okay, on the same subject. So syntopical reading is done in research or when you're seeking extensive knowledge in an area. That could be to write a paper or do a project or a report of some kind. But with this type of reading, you're having to read broadly. Syntopical reading has a slightly different focus than inspectional or analytical reading. In those types of reading, your focus is mainly on the author and trying to determine what they have to say. But with syntopical reading, you still have that initial focus, but now you're adding a second focus. And that second focus is, what are your needs as a researcher and writer? And that's what's really guiding your reading, is you're looking for specific information that will help you. You're not just reading everything the author says in general. Okay, so synoptical reading uses both inspectional and analytical reading. There are 5 steps. The first 4 steps cover the first 2 reading questions we covered way back at the beginning of this book, which were, what is the book about as a whole, and what is it saying in detail? And even though I'm saying book, you could just replace the word book with source. Okay, so the 5th step of synoptical reading basically covers the last 2 questions. Is the book true in whole or part? And what of it? So what? What is the significance or importance of what is being said in this source? So there are 4 ways that inspectional reading will help you with syntopical reading. The first is that it'll help you narrow down the amount of sources that you need to read. So if you're going to type in the Book of Ruth for the Bible in the normal library, you're going to be bombarded with a ton of sources, more than you would have time to read in this semester. So by doing an inspectional reading of these sources, it'll help you focus on which ones would be the most relevant for you to read for your paper. Second time, obviously, if you don't have to read all those sources, it'll save you a lot of time. But also, even within the sources, It can help you pinpoint certain sections. Maybe if you have a 20-page article to read, but you really notice that one or two headings seem to be the most directly related to what you want to say in your paper, you could just read those sections of the article. The same goes for a book. If there's just a chapter that's very relevant to what you have to say, just read that chapter. There's no rule that says you have to read an entire article or you have to read an entire book. You just need to read the sections that are relevant to you, and you need to read enough to be able to get the full context of what the author is saying to make sure that you correctly understand the sections that are relevant to you. All right, lastly, narrowing down of an idea. Sometimes in our brainstorming stage, our ideas can still be kind of very general. And once we see what other people were writing on and doing, it can help us narrow down and focus on a more specific prompt. So for your Ruth essay, doing some inspectional reading might help you narrow down your conflict even a little bit more. And then lastly, with inspectional reading, you always want to have the focus of your idea. So in this case, it would be the conflict that you're going to write about for the book of Ruth, all right? The goal of inspectional reading for syntopical reading is to determine if the source says something important about your idea, okay? You're not just looking for something that's talking about the book of Ruth, you're looking for something that's going to talk specifically about what you want to say about the book of Ruth, okay? So Adler and Van Doren put it this way. In syntopical reading, it is you and your concerns that are primarily to be served, not the books that you read. Okay, so again, that goes back to our shift in focus of your needs as the writer and researcher over the needs of the author. Okay, how do you use analytical reading and syntopical reading? Okay, there's mainly 4 areas that will come into play. 1, you're going to have to be able to determine what the source is about. You're going to have to know what the author's argument is. You're going to have to come to terms with the author. So remember, terms is understanding how are they defining certain words, or if it's in a certain field where they have slang or lingo, you're going to have to know what those definitions of those terms are. And then lastly, know how the author answers their question, or what problem were they trying to address and how did they address it. So analytical reading and syntopical reading is going to help you go from the broad knowledge you got with inspectional reading down to the nitty-gritty details that will give you the evidence that you need in your paper to prove what it is you want to say. So for the first step for syntopical reading is you need to find the relevant passages. So when you're reading, you're going to be looking for those passages or quotes or ideas that will help you in your argument, so that are going to help you in your paper address what you believe the central conflict is in the book of Ruth. So the key concept to take away from Adler and Van Doren in this section is the original intention of the author in writing this source may not be relevant to you, okay? But what only matters in synoptical reading is that this source helps you with your own idea. So sometimes the source maybe isn't even on the book of Ruth specifically. It could be on Jewish customs, or it could be on how to translate Hebrew. But if the book or source provides something that's relevant to you making your point, you can then use that in your paper even if it doesn't quite match the original source. So what I want you to do is go ahead and pause this video and answer the first step for synoptical reading. Look back at the main conflict that you chose for assignment 2, which is all the way back up here. It's right here. Choose your conflict. And I want you to explain, is there anything you see in Raskas' article that could help you prove or explain your conflict in the book of Ruth? So answer this question, and when you're done, come back to the video and I'll cover step 2. All right, so for step 2, you're going to be bringing the authors to terms. So remember, by the word terms, we're meaning how is a writer defining a word. I can give the example of the word love. How I might use the word love is different from how you would use the word love and define it, okay? So with syntopical reading, it's really important that you kind of define your own terms and you make the other authors come to term with you. You kind of translate their ideas into your vocabulary, into your definitions, okay? This is what helps keep you in control of your paper rather than letting your sources dominate and take over, okay? So how you can do this is to think about what are the terms that are important for you in this paper. And this might be a little tricky to do before you're kind of ready to sit down and draft. But just think right now, what are maybe some of the keywords or definitions that you believe are important for describing or understanding your conflict in the Book of Ruth? So I would write those down, and once you have them, then maybe reflect back over Raskas's article and ask yourself, does she use any terms that are similar to yours? And if there are some similar ideas, but maybe she uses different words, how would you kind of translate them over to match your terms? Okay. So go ahead, pause the video and complete this step, and then when you're done, come back and I'll move on to step 3. All right, so for step 3, getting the questions clear. Okay, when you're doing a research paper, you have a question that you're trying to answer or a proposition that you're trying to prove. So right now, your proposition is that the conflict you've chosen is the central conflict in the Book of Ruth, and you're seeking to prove that your proposition is true. Okay, now the one tricky problem that comes up with research is that it's rare for sources to address the same questions as you or the same propositions. All right, so this is what kind of goes back to what I was saying with the prior 2 steps, and especially step 1. You're going to have to find the information and make this information fit your needs. Now, when I'm saying that, I am also saying too, don't take what the author's saying out of context and misrepresent it. But it's okay if the source was written for a different purpose than the purpose that you have, okay? So Adler and Van Doren word it this way. But even if the source does not discuss the question explicitly, we can sometimes find an implicit answer in the book. So what that means is even if the source doesn't explicitly or directly address the problem or topic that you are dealing with, there may still be some information that you can use. All right, so when you're looking at a source, there's 3 main ways a source can help you. It can help you with the topic. So this is kind of very generally. So maybe the book is just, or the source is just on Ruth in general. Maybe it describes the characters or how the book was written or how it was translated or about that time period in Israel. Okay, it may just give you a broad overview and relate to the topic. All right, second, the source may provide you more direct evidence that relates to your conflict. All right, so how does this idea manifest itself? Maybe it's dealing with translations of words or with story form and structure. Okay, this is where your source might provide you more like direct quotes or specifics that you can use to back up your proposition. And then third is what we call application. Like, what does it mean? So this type of source might help you explain why is understanding this type of conflict in the Book of Ruth important? What does it mean for our life today in the 21st century? Okay, so a source can help you with any one of these 3, and sometimes it's helpful to keep this in mind when looking for sources. Do I want something to help me with the topic, maybe give me background knowledge that I need? Do I need something to give me specific details and evidence? Or do I need something to help me with the application? So go ahead and go to the worksheet, and what I want you to do is look at Raskas's article and see if her article can help you with any one of these 3 areas with your conflict. And it's possible for some of you that her article won't help you at all. And if that's the case, that is okay. Just explain how you arrived at that conclusion down here. All right. So pause the video, complete this, and come back.